my microphone. Look at that. Okay, it's going to take me a little while to get used to doing live broadcasts using YouTube because this is a new platform for me. So what I'm going to do is at the first Friday of every month, I'm actually going to be doing a live broadcast of Photoshop Friday. Partly that's because I want to hear from you. And partly that's because I really like to participate in something that that I can do kind of on an ongoing basis. So please tell me if you can see and hear what we're working on here. Let me switch over. Okay, let me just make sure that you have the link to the materials. Oh, look at that, quilt batting. So you can see that Elliot has had a good time in here. Welcome, welcome. Elliot really does like to play in my office quite a bit. So once you go ahead and get that download done, all right, great. Everyone can see in here? Yes. So I'm going to switch over actually to Photoshop. Please let me know if you can get access to that file, okay? I'm going to go ahead and paste in the link here. And in fact, pretty sure I can, let's see. Oh yes, here we go. This is the download. And what this is going to do is take you to the Dropbox that's got the two files that are in here. One of them is a completely finished, almost completely finished layout. I've already gone ahead and put in the papers, which of course, because they're layered files, you'll be able to use in any project that you want. And then the other one is the halftone file that we're going to be working with. And it was asked here if this is being recorded, and the answer to that is yes. So you'll be able to come back to this free version through the weekend, and then you'll be able to access this throughout for those of you who are in the Photoshop Friday Forever. So let me go ahead and grab my other window. There it is. Hooray! So let me go ahead and switch over to the screen share, and we can get started here. This is a really cool technique, and I must say it's been a while, couple of weeks even, or even more than that, since I've actually been able to bust out my digital supplies, and I must say that it was really fun to get back into using them. It's something that I've gone a little bit away from as I've been developing other things, but gosh, this was so much fun. So I've got my assistant here on Hangouts inside of our Hangouts. So so we actually use Google Hangouts together when we're doing pretty much anything. My assistant, Megan, is from Canada. So those of you who are from Canada, say hello across our northern border there. So here is what our layout is going to look like when you open it. Mine, the only thing that's different about this one in front of me is that I've already added in my photograph and I've got my text, my journaling already written here. I use the Bebas font, or Bebas as Heidi calls it. And I'm actually not sure what the original designer of that font wanted to call it, but it's one of my very favorite ones, and it's also free. So make sure you go and check that out. You can find it at dafont.com. It's a really great kind of narrow, all caps sans serif font, and it's really valuable for lots of different things. So let's go ahead through the layer stack, just like we usually do, and I can show you some of the features of this particular page. We're going to be working with the halftone circle that you can see right here, and we're going to be adding another halftone pattern right over the top of this light blue. So let's go ahead and kind of work our way up the layer stack. So the brown pattern paper is from Danny Mogstad. Her textures are absolutely gorgeous. I've been kind of raving about them for years. And I turn to her work for a lot of my solid pattern papers because she always has that extra little bit of interest that she adds in. I've also included a really cute, very wild pattern paper here that so you can see what the difference would be if you chose to do a pattern out around the edges versus doing double solid, so solid background and solid inside paper. Now, in order to make this work, whether or not you choose to use this light blue paper is up to you, but in order for our technique to work, your inner paper here needs to be some kind of a semi-solid color. And it needs to be something that's light enough colored that you'll be able to see once we get our texture on there. I'll go ahead and go through when we do that, the different blending mode that you can use if you do end up with a dark pattern paper here in the middle. It's only a tiny little setting and you get a completely different look. So after we have our pattern papers, then we've got this great halftone circle here. And this is a PNG file, which you can get simply by opening the page. I've gone ahead and just pulled that one on. This makes a really cool frame. And you can see here that as it circles around, that it wraps in whatever that photograph is that's on that bottom right corner of your page. This adds a lot of cool interest because we have this kind of intersecting look here that comes down vertically and then goes across horizontally. And so these two layered circles, one that's got the title in it and then one that is that halftone pattern, really soften that up, but they also provide some visual direction. So the cool balance that we achieve here has this effect because we've got a ton of different things here in the bottom right corner and then one teeny thing up in the top left corner. Now in the original one that I posted, kind of the preview one, this is over here. And you can see that the feel of this page kind of changes depending on where you put that. But this big open space right here is a really interesting kind of blank canvas for us to work with. So let's go ahead and keep going up. We've got several borders here. I like to stack up some borders because it adds that extra bit of visual interest. That's important when we're dealing with a very large blank space right here so that we can still have that interest without compromising, I guess, this blank area right up here. So these are all our borders. And then we've got our pattern paper mat. And I chose a textured one and also a geometric one, which I find is very hard to use, even though I love geometric pattern paper and I especially love herringbone pattern paper. It's always really hard for me to use because is so visually dense. It's hard to be able to balance that out against my photographs and not have it be super overwhelming. So one of my strategies here was to use that in just a teeny dose and to make sure that my photo is fairly close up. So the interest in the photograph is very obvious, and the focal point, here's the secret, the focal point of my photograph is actually larger than the pattern in the pattern paper. So it's something to consider as you're going through trying to use those amazing pattern papers that have cool dramatic patterns on them, but really are hard to use in real life. Boy, do I ever know that. So then we've got our photo mat, which is just a white piece right here. And then our plus photo layer. Now, here in the photograph, you'll be able to see that the photo mat is the one with the drop shadow, and the plus photo layer does not have a drop shadow. So this is going to act a little bit like a Polaroid. I've also included some brushes here that are kind of ink so that it looks like it was brushed with a paintbrush. And I like the different contrast that that adds. So we've got some really strong lines here, and then it's kind of contrasted with some of these more handmade looking elements. And then up, we've got a date, and then we've got our title right here, and then we've got our number 1. After that, our journaling, and then our journaling snippet, the little papers down here, and then the journaling lines themselves. So we've got kind of a lot going on here, but it looks really cool, and it's a great foundation for your future, for your own work here. So one of the things that you'll notice is that I chose colors not that match with my photograph, but that coordinate. So she's got a navy blue shirt here in the stripes, but I didn't choose navy blue because I wanted for the pattern that we're going to be using, the halftone pattern, to be able to really stand out. We're going to be changing the color of the halftone circle as part of our sort of second bonus technique tonight. But you can also see she's got just a teeny bit of red here, as well as some pink in her lips that really helps tie in the patterns that you can see here in the background, as well as just the little pops of red that you see in the corners. So that's kind of the story behind how and why I constructed the page in the way I did. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and add in our very cool halftone pattern. Let's do that right at the top of the light blue pattern paper. Now, of course, you can choose a different solid colored pattern paper or lightly patterned, semi-solid. I would consider this to be a solid paper, even though it's got just a little bit of texture here in the corners. And let's go ahead and open up that halftone pattern. I've got mine open right here, but you'll be able to find yours in File and Open. And then you'll navigate to the place where your download is. Then you'll have unzipped that, and you'll open up your halftone pattern. So this is a PNG file, meaning that it does not have a background to it. That's important because we want for the blue paper underneath to be able to show through. This one's also black and white. So once we, or black, so once we get this actually onto our page, you're going to notice how strong that black pattern is. Super overwhelming. So let's go ahead and get that on, and then we can make some changes to the appearance of that halftone. So we're going to, with our move tool selected here, rather than having to zoom in to be able to sort of click really carefully on one of these little dots, what I want you to do is hold down your Command key or your Control key if you're on Windows while you click and drag to pull this over. By doing that, you'll actually be able to click anywhere on that page, and it doesn't matter. You'll automatically be able to select the layer that you've targeted. That is really useful when you're dealing with trying to move little things like text lines or halftone patterns like this one. So let's go ahead and just pull this over. We put this on the right layer here, right above our solid pattern paper. And now we can control or command and drag. The same thing works to be able to move this within the document itself. So let's go ahead and resize this. I'm just going to hold down Shift. And you'll remember in Photoshop Elements that you do not hold down Shift. It's so weird that they're complete opposites of each other, and it's really hard to explain, I have to say. So we're going to hold down Shift, or if you're in this, then you're going to not hold down Shift because Adobe is weird and they make the same thing function in completely opposite ways depending on what version of Photoshop you're using. And I don't know why. So let's talk a little bit about the ways that we can modify this. We can, because this is a solid colored PNG file, we can just color it and make it just that good. But what I wanted to do is actually help this pattern to blend into the background so that it creates a tone-on-tone effect. It will make it subtle enough that we'll be able to still get that feeling of having a really wide expanse of stuff right here, but it will be visible enough that it'll add to the interest of the page. So you can see that the density of this texture is actually going to be right down here at the bottom. That's the other thing that's going to help kind of keep this space really clear and open. So what I'm going to do is actually just clip this in so that the edges conform to the edges of our pattern paper. The way that we do that is by holding down Alt or Option if you're on the Mac, and then hover your mouse on the line in between your halftone pattern and the pattern paper that's underneath it. You see that your cursor turns into this little icon that's got a downward arrow in it. Your icon might be different depending on what version of Photoshop you're using, but it should be fairly obvious that it's going to indent, which is exactly what is going to happen when we click down on this. So you can see the layer indents itself, and now our halftone pattern has conformed itself to the size and shape of the layer underneath it. So cool. So now we can actually make some changes to the pattern itself, because right now it's just way too distracting because it's so dramatic. So let's go ahead and change this simply by using a blending mode. We're going to come up to our blending modes, which are at the top of the screen here if you are using Photoshop. And they'll either be at the top of the layer stack or in the tools at the bottom of your screen if you're in Photoshop Elements. So we're going to just select Soft Light from this blending mode list. So you can see here that you get a really nice tone-on-tone effect. I think that this is even too strong for the look that we're going for. One benefit here is that basically that soft light has taken on the shade of that pattern paper behind it, but has changed the color of that just a little bit. So you don't have to try to guess what color to turn this in order to make that tone-on-tone effect. Soft light is going to do that for you. It's still a little bit strong. So we've got a couple of options here. One is that we can come back and try to recolor. So if we come back to normal, rather than being black, we could recolor this to something like navy blue. Let's go ahead and try that. I might try that as an approach in my own work. So I'm going to click on my black or whatever foreground color right over here. And I'm going to select something a little bit darker, but still, or a little bit lighter, but still in the blue family because that's the color I'm trying to create here. So I'm going to just spin up to blue and make it down here in the navy blue region, and then click OK. And now here's a hotkey that I hope you memorize. Write it down if you have to, or this is going to be part of the PDF that you'll get. It's Option, Shift, and Delete, or Alt and Shift and Delete. What that's going to do is recolor whatever layer that you're on with whatever your foreground color is. It's so quick and useful, and it's one of those very few hotkeys that I would recommend that you commit to memory. Practice it 10 or 20 times and you'll have it forever. I really only use a handful of hotkeys, really. Even though I talk through a bunch of them in my classes, I really only use a handful. A lot of designers use hotkeys for everything and never touch the mouse, and they're switching between tools with hotkeys and they're creating selections. I mean, it's crazy. But for me, filling something with the foreground color is one of those things I do often enough that it does make sense to have that one committed to memory. So it's Option, Shift, and Delete, or Alt and Shift and Delete, or backspace, I guess, if you're in Windows. Okay, so I'm just going to do that, and it fills in that whole layer with my foreground color. Now we can come up to Soft Light, and it makes it a little bit lighter. Great. Now this is one of those sort of shot in the dark kind of approaches that I'm not super happy about, because I'd rather be able to have a little bit more control over things. And once you change the color of something, you really have to step backward in time in order to get back to where you were. Whereas keeping it black and then making adjustments in the blending mode or in the opacity, you can sort of get back and forth really easily. That's the kind of approach I really like. So we're going to step backward. If you are in Photoshop Elements, you can just Control Z or Command and Z backward as many times as you need to. Here in the full version of Photoshop, of course, you only get once, and then you have to use your history palette that's right up here. I've docked mine in very first because I use it all the time. So you can see I make a lot of changes, and I'm not going to call them mistakes. I'm going to call them features. I make a lot of features while I'm working on stuff. And sometimes I like the feature. Sometimes that feature needs to go away. So I tend to need to go back multiple steps though. So I'm going to come back to before that fill layer command, in which we did Option, Shift, and Delete, or Alt and Shift and Backspace to change the color. Let's commit that one to memory. Here we go. Option, Shift, and Delete. Say it to yourself. Alt and Shift and Backspace. And I promise you, it will be worth committing that one. So rather than doing that, let's go ahead and change our blending mode, just like we did before. We're going to go to Soft Light. And now let's go ahead and change the opacity of our layer. Rather than trying to change the base color, let's just change the visibility of the whole thing. I just finished saying that I don't use hotkeys very much, but here's another one that is among the handful. And that handful might grow, actually, as I keep thinking about it. No, I don't think so. So when you have the Move tool selected, quick and easy way to change the opacity of layers is to use the number pad. So easy. So starting from 0, which is 100%, this only works with the Move tool selected. So if it's not working for you, make sure that you've got the Move tool selected here. And then you're just going to go down in order. Since we're looking for something that's going to give us the look we want, we're just going to go down. So the number 9 represents 90%. So that means it's taken away 10% of basically the density of this layer, or how dramatic that's going to look. So we're going to go down to 9, which is 90%. Didn't change very much. How about 8, 7, 6? You can see that this is starting to really kind of fade out into the background. Now I'm at about, what, 4, and I'm really starting to like this. We've got a really cool amount of density right down here with this cool geometric pattern, and then just kind of bunches down into some kind of grungy stuff down here, which I really like. But it also leaves this great space right here that still reads as space because the dots are so small. You can go down a little bit further. Let's look down at 3 and 2, and 1 is 10%, which I think is really invisible. So I would say anything between 2, 3, 4, and there's 5 is a little bit too strong for me. Of course, you can do this to your own taste, whatever it is that's going to make your heart sing. So this is how we create that tone on tone effect. Now, if you happen to be using a dark pattern paper, soft light might produce a really weird effect for you. So in that case, you might try one of the other blending modes. In fact, let's actually try one of the other blending modes just now because we can. We can choose screen with a black layer here. Screen is going to be invisible. We can choose multiply, which is going to take all of that dark tone and keep it. So for our light colored pattern paper, the only thing that we've done here is reduce the opacity to 30%. And that's why it looks gray. So those two are not going to get us anywhere. Really, I like soft light or overlay, which is going to, in our case, essentially do the same thing because it's a neutral color, black. If you're going to be using a different color, say the overlay, our halftone overlay was red, it would actually blend in the red color into the pattern paper, and it'll create kind of an interesting double shading effect. Go ahead and try that as you would like to. Since our original layer is black, we're not going to see any of that change. So essentially, overlay and soft light are going to do the same thing. So feel free to experiment with those. And you can see how great this looks. I really like the grunge texture here. So let me switch back. I'm going to stop sharing. And let's switch back. Hi. I would like to see if anyone has questions. So I'm going to go back. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like we have been, it looks like Megan has been putting in the link here. And don't worry, because if you've come in late or if you are wondering, you will be able to watch this all weekend long. And because we're not doing this until Friday night, we'll go ahead and put this up until Monday. So okay, it looks like we've got just a few questions, but Megan's doing a great job. Oh, Susan, you're so sweet. She says she doesn't have a question, but she just wants to say happy to see my beautiful face. Oh, I can't tell you how much I needed to hear that today. So what I want to do is actually switch back. So let's go ahead and hey, Anne. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see you. So Anne, when you go back to rewatch this, everything will be full resolution. So it might just be It might just be your computer. Wow, that was a really big pause right there. Whoa. Okay, so let's go back to Photoshop, shall we? That's where all the magic happens. So what I mean is that it might actually be the connection because everybody's kind of piled on here. So I'm going to go back to my screen share. And here is this one. Now I can sneak some Diet Mountain Dew while no one's looking. Awesome. All right. So we've got our very cool halftone pattern. And we had a question there about how you might search for a template that has something like this in it. What I would do is actually just do a Google search for halftone, and you'll be able to find lots of different things. If you do halftone vector, that's going to get you a lot of things that don't have backgrounds to them. And I got to say, there's so much out there that is completely free, and that makes me really happy. There are some styles of things that are completely free and also kind of ugly, but this happens to not be one of those. Hooray! So what I want to do here is show you another technique. Let's go ahead and do that on our circle layer right here. We're actually going to be creating a pattern overlay for this solid colored circle, but rather than using a blending mode, we're actually going to be creating this using an adjustment layer. The adjustment layers are down here at the bottom of your layer stack if you're in the full version of Photoshop, and they're at the top of your layer stack if you are in Photoshop Elements. And our adjustment layer looks like a little circle that is split in half with one side clear and one side filled in. So we're going to come up and choose gradient. This is going to be fun. Now this is going to come in something, whatever your foreground color was. Now you can see down here in the layers palette that I actually clicked on halftone circle first, which is the reason why this is coming in right above that. So what we want to do here is actually change the foreground and background colors. That way these can create a really cool effect. So I'm going to go ahead and just cancel this, and let's change our foreground and background colors. What we can do here is let's set our foreground color to something that's blue, doesn't matter what. And this is going to be one of those experimental things. We're going to set that to something blue, and then we'll click OK. And now let's try. I'm going to switch my foreground and background color using that little arrow icon that's got a little, that goes across a little corner. It says switch foreground and background colors. Now I'm going to switch to red. This is going to make a really interesting pattern, and it's probably going to go through the purple color. And we're going to see what we can do to kind of change that so we get a quicker transition between blue and red. Ready to do our experiment? Okay, here we go. Whether or not you're ready, fasten your seatbelt. So we've got our halftone circle layer clicked here in the layers palette. And now we're going to choose our adjustment layers again, and we're going to choose gradient. We're going to need to change a couple of things here in the pop-up. One of them is going to be that we'll choose foreground and background. That's the very first one. So what it does by default is foreground to transparency. You can see that has a pretty cool look to it. Yeah. But what we're looking for here is actually foreground to background. And then we can experiment with the different styles of gradient. By default, this will come in as a line. You can see that this is linear is what they call it, so that it goes in a horizontal transition between blue and red. What we would like to do is actually change our direction for our gradient to be a circle. So we've changed the gradient to foreground, going through a gradient into background. And now we're going to change the style from linear to radial. This is going to give us a circle in the middle, just like so. And we can go ahead and pull that down right over the top of where that halftone circle is going to be. Awesome. Let's go ahead and click OK. And now we can clip this gradient layer down onto the halftone circle so that it actually works and doesn't fill in the whole pattern paper with this gradient. This is a fun technique to be able to blend in two colors that are pretty far apart on the color wheel. So we're going to create our clipping mask here in exactly the same way. We're going to just hold down Alt or Option and then hover the line on, or hover your mouse on the line in between our gradient fill and the halftone circle that's underneath it, and then click down to create our clipping mask. So what I see here is that we have a whole lot of purple and not a whole lot of blue and red. So let's go ahead and edit this. We're just going to double click there to come back to our gradient. And I think it will be easier if we unclip this. So if you're in Photoshop Elements, you can just pull that up to break the clipping mask. And if you're in the full version of Photoshop, you can actually just right click and it will choose. So if I'm here, clipped in, I can right click and it will choose Release Clipping Mask. So let's go ahead and set this back to radial. And then by default, that comes in at 100%. There it is. And you can kind of see why this would have come in over here with a bunch of purple, because that's what we mostly see. One of the things that we can do here to make the transition a little bit sharper, you can see we have a lot of purple right here. Let's come back into our gradient and we can actually edit the gradient itself. We'll do that right here in the little gradient panel. So what we're going to do is actually drag the top slider as well as the bottom slider. That's going to move those really close together. Give us a fairly quick transition here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now probably the easiest way to line this up is if we set our gradient for just a minute to some opacity that's going to help us look at the layer underneath it. It's another great use for our opacity. So with our Move tool selected, you'll remember that we can change the opacity of any layer using the numbers. So we can just type in something like 5, and that way we'll be able to see, okay, most of the red is going to fall inside of that, inside of our halftone. So we're going to need to make an adjustment here. So let's come back. Change that opacity back, just type 0. And then back into that editor. That's looking quite a bit better. So now let's go ahead and clip this down, Alt or Option, and click down. And then we'll change the opacity here to 0, which is 100%. Remember that opacity only works if your Move tool is selected. Let's go ahead and change that. And holla, doesn't that look cool? So here's another way that you can change the look of a halftone. Feel free to experiment with this because it's a really cool and fun feature. Some of the other kind of applications for this gradient would be if you're going to do watercolor brushes, especially ones that kind of have multiple splats going every which way, feel free to try a gradient with that. It'd be really cool. We can do the same thing and try a gradient with our soft light on the patterned background if we want to as well, on the patterned, the halftone that we've used here. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that you create. So let me go back out and see if there's any questions, and then we can go ahead and be finished for tonight, and I'll be very excited to see what you can make. So I'm going to switch over. And there we go. So, okay, so Shaheen is wondering, oh, okay, so Shaheen is telling us that that some of the pop-ups are actually not working. And I wonder if that's a setting that I have in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and check. I'm going to come back to my editor. So I had it just select an application, but you would think that Photoshop or that the application would actually contain all of those pop-ups as well. So let me just go and check while I share this. Trying to figure out where, there we go. Okay, so if I share, hold on for the technical, oh yes, always technical. Okay. There we go. Okay. This is the fun of doing live things, right? Okay, so I said application window and used Photoshop as my application. What if we try your entire screen? And this will be good info for another time. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. And now I'm going to launch the gradient options box. And what I'd like to know from you is whether or not you can see that where you could not see that before. It must have to do with the fact that this is a pop-up, that it's not recognized as an application window. So I'm going to go ahead and check and see if that is the case. All right. Yes, thank you. I know that I shouldn't be beta testing on live people, but this is stuff that I could not have expected. So awesome. Thank you. So let's switch back over to Photoshop since I just went through all of this. What I'm really hoping is that my switching is going to actually work with the recording. If not, I'm going to go back in and put in the techniques that are missing there. So this will all be available. No worries at all. Okay, so I'm going to do your entire screen. And I'm switch back over to Photoshop. There we go. Thank you so much for your patience here. Now I'm hearing 5 things at once. So much fun. Okay. We are having so much fun. And as long as we keep telling ourselves that, it will be so much fun. So let's talk through the gradient piece again. I'm going to go ahead and just hide that one. So we've got our halftone circle right here. And what we want to do is add in that gradient layer that's right over the top of it. So let's go ahead now to our adjustment layers button. And we're going to choose gradient. And you should actually be able to see the gradient fill box pop up because we love pop-up boxes. They're half the way to be able to do anything in Photoshop. And I'm glad I learned that tonight. So we're going to choose our foreground to background color, like so. And then we're going to just click OK. Now that's going to come in. I had another layer tucked in there. There we go. That's going to come in and fill up your whole screen, and it's going to look like this one, right? We've seen this result before. So what we need to do is go in and change that to the radial gradient. So let's come back into edit. When we're editing adjustment layers, we just double click on that thumbnail, and then we can choose radial. Now we had a question about being able to drag this. Let's go ahead and try aligning with layer. Just turn that one off and see if that doesn't help to be able to fix the alignment so you can actually drag that. Essentially what that would do is enable you to be able to drag that back and forth because these adjustment layers are actually vector layers. So you can picture the blue of this just going on forever and the blue of this on this side just going on forever. And so by saying we don't want to align with that layer, then we can kind of put that red wherever we would like. So we can go ahead and click OK here and change the opacity. You remember how to do that with your numbers. So I'm just going to change that to the number 5. Let's go with 6. Let's even go with 7. Because what I want to see is the ability to really customize the transition between blue and red so we don't end up with a whole bunch of purple right in here. So we're going to go ahead back into our gradient, and the ability to actually edit the gradient is by coming into the gradient fill layer. And from there, we actually can come in and edit the gradient itself. So we're going to go ahead and shift the red and the blue so that they come really close together. And essentially what that's going to do, I double clicked. Essentially what that's going to do is allow us to squish together that transition right here. So we don't get a ton of purple. We end up just getting red and then a little bit of transition and then blue. And it's going to be really cool looking. Now you can see here in the pop-up that you can actually, and now you can actually see the pop-up, hooray! So you can actually see here that I can increase the amount of red that's in here by just adding more red in the little slider. So you can see right here that red is going to take on a little bit more than half of that radial gradient. So we want to move that back down. And now we can click OK. I'm going to drag that until it sits right on top. You can see that right down here in the bottom and right across here. So when we change the opacity of this back to 100, we'll be able to see that really quick transition between red and blue. So let's click OK here. And now let's change our opacity back. Remember, we do this with the numbers with our move tool selected. So we're just going to type 0. And now we'll clip this in. Alter option, and then click down to fill that. So cool. Seriously, I'm impressed with my own work every time that happens because it's just really cool looking. So if you are not able to move that circle around, here's one way that you can do that. And I find myself needing to rasterize gradients or any kind of adjustment layer sometimes if I want to make certain changes to it. All you will need to do is go ahead in your layers palette here and right click and choose rasterize layer. So rather than that being a vector that goes on forever, it will essentially just be that 12 by 12 layer with the gradient inside of it. And then you can reposition it exactly how you would like to. In Photoshop Elements, that command is called simplify layer. So you can see now it turns into literally a set of pixels with a red dot in the middle. And now you can change that, move it around, resize, whatever you need to, just as you would with any other layer that you might have pulled on here. So I really like the way this one looks. Let's go back to our video here. There's a delay, so it kind of throws me off. Yay! Okay. Sandy and Barbara, and those of you who are having a little bit of trouble, mostly probably because of the pop-up thing, please feel free to send me an email, Jessica@JessicaSprague.com, and Megan will be available, as well as it'll be available inside of the classroom. And the video and PDF will be up there. I'm going to leave this one up for a few more days than I normally would, mostly because this is a new thing for all of us. And how much fun is this, right? So what I want to do is make this kind of a monthly thing. And I'd be very interested in having your feedback here. So let me just show you one more little peek as we're sort of heading out the door into the layout itself. because this is the reason why I scrapbook. Well, that's going weird. Let me just get this. There we go. Okay, this is the reason why I scrapbook. And I'm just going to turn that back. Okay, so here is the evidence of my beautiful life. For those of you who have read my blog post from today, the FBI just released a whole set of photographs from the 9/11 attacks on the Pentagon. And for those of you who have read my blog posts in the past, you'll know that a good friend of mine that I knew from the time I moved to Idaho in 7th grade all the way through was killed at the Pentagon on 9/11. He was actually a civilian, but he was in naval intelligence. And in my blog post for today, I talk about the fact that the Twin Towers, because the magnitude of that disaster was so much greater, the Twin Towers have gotten a lot of press, but the attack at the Pentagon has gotten relatively less. And so the release of these photographs 16 years later hit me really hard. So I want to share this story with you tonight because this is evidence of my beautiful life. Rowan, of course, is older than this, but these are the memories that are precious to me. I clearly remember sitting on the porch one day, and Rowan came up to me with this flower, and I don't even know what color the petals ought to have been, and I don't even know if she took them off. All I remember is sitting there, and she holds up this basically like this stem with a bauble on top of it and says, "Look, this flower is bald, just like Daddy." And it was such a precious and hilarious story because she was beginning to associate this flower being hairless, just like her daddy was. And it's one of those little teeny stories that if I hadn't taken this photograph and then gone back through to create this page, that would not have been brought to my mind. So it's one of those little things that I'm super grateful for. Sorry, excuse me. So as we part ways this evening, I want you to do something for me. I want you to think of something that is a story that you are super grateful for, a story that is evidence of your beautiful life. And I want you to write that down. Please share that page. These are our beautiful evidence of our lives, and even those little teeny stories are really where the magic helps. You guys are wonderful, and scrapbookers get this kind of stuff in ways that other people just flat out don't because they overlook it. So have a wonderful night, my dears, and please get a hold of me if you have questions here or requests for techniques that you'd like to see. And have a great Photoshop Friday, and I will see you guys soon. Okay, bye-bye. I'm somehow not going away. Okay. How do I stop? There we go. says my video is still going, but this one says that I'm offline. Wait.